The quiet secretary from Beverly Hillbillies was secretly dating one of comedy's wildest stars, and Hollywood tried to bury the truth. You think you know Nancy Culp, the serious secretary from Beverly Hillbillies. Always proper, always polite. But Nancy lived a double life that would blow your mind. She was a war hero, a political rebel, and she had a secret romance with the last person anyone would expect. This is her real story, the one Hollywood never wanted you to hear. Nancy Jane Culp was born August 28, 1921, in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. But don't let that quiet small-town beginning fool you. This woman was destined for something bigger. Her family moved around, first to tiny Mifflintown, then down to Miami when Nancy was a teenager. Even as a kid, Nancy was different. While other girls played with dolls, Nancy buried herself in books. She was hungry for knowledge, hungry for something more than what everyone expected from women back then. Most girls in the 1940s got married right after high school. Nancy, she went to Florida State College for Women and got a journalism degree. But she didn't stop there. She kept pushing, kept learning. She earned a master's degree in English and French from the University of Miami. Nancy wanted to be a writer, and she made it happen. She got a job at a Miami newspaper, writing stories and chasing leads. Later she moved to Hollywood and worked in MGM's publicity department, promoting other stars. But here's where Nancy's story takes a dramatic turn. In 1944, World War II was raging, and Nancy made a choice that shocked everyone who knew her. She put her career on hold, and joined the U.S. Naval Reserve. This wasn't common for women. Most stayed home, worked in factories, or became nurses. Nancy went straight into the military. She trained hard, worked harder, and climbed the ranks to lieutenant junior grade. That rank meant something. It meant respect. It meant she could lead men in a time when women barely had rights. Nancy never talked much about her war service later in life, but those years in the Navy changed her completely. She came back tougher, more focused, and absolutely fearless. The quiet girl from Pennsylvania was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew exactly what she wanted, and wasn't afraid to go after it. When Nancy returned to civilian life, she started taking small acting roles. She wasn't your typical Hollywood beauty. She was tall, angular, with a sharp voice and serious presence. But casting directors saw something special. Nancy had this ability to make even the smallest part memorable. She appeared in major films like Shame with Alan Ladd, A Star is Born with Judy Garland, and The Model and the Marriage Broker. Always playing the spinster, the school teacher, the serious assistant. Never the leading lady, but always unforgettable. Then 1962 changed everything. CBS was casting a new comedy show called The Beverly Hillbillies. They needed someone to play Miss Jane Hathaway, the uptight bank secretary who dealt with the Clampett family's wild antics. Nancy auditioned and landed the role that would define her career. The show became a massive hit, one of the most popular sitcoms in television history. Nancy's character was proper and secretly in love with the handsome but dim-witted Jethro Bodine. Nancy's performance was pure magic. Her deadpan delivery, perfect timing, and physical comedy made Miss Jane Hathaway a household name. She could make you laugh with just a look, a gesture, or the way she said Mr. Drysdale. In 1967, Nancy received an Emmy nomination for her work. She was at the top of her game, beloved by millions of Americans who tuned in every week to watch her fumble through romantic situations with Jethro. But behind the scenes, Nancy's real life was far more complicated than her TV character's innocent crushes. Back in 1951, before fame found her, Nancy had married Charles Malcolm Dacus. But by 1961, just as the Beverly Hillbillies was getting started, the marriage fell apart. They divorced quietly, and Nancy never spoke about it publicly. She never remarried, never had children, and as the years went by, people started wondering why. Was Nancy hiding something? Were there secrets she didn't want the world to know? The rumors started small but grew louder over time. Some people whispered that Nancy might be gay or bisexual. She never confirmed or denied anything. In interviews, she deflected personal questions with humor or simply changed the subject. Nancy was intensely private about her personal life. But there was one relationship, one secret romance, that almost nobody knew about. And it involved someone so unexpected, so unlikely, that even today it sounds impossible. That someone was Redd Foxx. Yes, Redd Foxx. The wild, outrageous comedian who later became famous as Fred Sanford on Sanford and Son. If Nancy Culp and Redd Foxx seem like the most unlikely couple in Hollywood history, that's because they were. Nancy was buttoned up, proper, educated, and white. Redd was loud, crude, street smart and black. Nancy made her living playing a prom secretary. Redd built his career telling dirty jokes in black nightclubs across America. But somehow, impossibly, they found each other. They met in the late 1960s at a charity event in Los Angeles. Both were at the peak of their fame, Nancy from the Beverly Hillbillies, Redd from his successful comedy albums and nightclub performances. People at the event saw them talking and didn't think much of it. After all, what could the proper Miss Jane Hathaway and the wild comedian possibly have in common? More than anyone imagined. Despite their different public personas, Nancy and Redd were both intellectuals. Nancy had her degrees in journalism and literature. Redd was self-educated, but incredibly well-read. He devoured books on history, philosophy and politics. Both were deeper thinkers than their TV characters suggested. Both felt trapped by Hollywood's expectation, and both were tired of being put in boxes by an industry that didn't really understand them. Their romance developed slowly, carefully, secretly. This was the late 1960s, remember. Interracial relationships were still illegal in many states. Even in liberal Hollywood, a romance between a white actress and a black comedian would have caused massive scandal. Nancy's career could have been destroyed, Redd's too. So they kept it quiet. No public appearances together, no photos, no interview, just private meetings, long conversations and genuine affection. People close to both of them later confirmed the relationship was real. It wasn't a publicity stunt or a Hollywood rumor. Nancy and Redd genuinely cared for each other. They connected on a level that had nothing to do with fame or image. It was about understanding, respect, and finding someone who saw past the surface to the real person underneath. But the pressure was enormous. The secrecy was exhausting. Nancy was already dealing with rumors about her sexuality. She was intensely private and hated having her personal life scrutinized. Adding an interracial relationship to the mix would have been career suicide in 1960s America. So they made the painful decision to end. Whether it fated naturally or was forced to end by outside pressure, nobody knows for sure. But it happened, and it left both of them changed. By the mid-1970s, the Beverly Hillbillies had ended its long run. Nancy continued acting, appearing on shows like Perry Mason, The Love Boat, and later Murphy Brown. But the roles were smaller, less frequent. Nancy was getting older in an industry that worshipped youth. She could have faded away quietly, living off her Beverly Hillbillies residual. Instead, she made another shocking decision. In 1984, Nancy Culp announced she was running for the U.S. House of Representatives. This wasn't some celebrity vanity project. Nancy ran a serious campaign for Pennsylvania's 9th District. She ran as a Democrat, campaigning on education reform, environmental protection, and equal rights. Nancy believed in public service. She wanted to use her fame for something meaningful, something that could actually help people. But the campaign hit obstacles immediately. The district leaned Republican, and Nancy was a Hollywood liberal in conservative rural Pennsylvania. Worse, her old co-star Buddy Ebsen, who played Jed Clampett on the Beverly Hillbillies, publicly opposed her candidacy. He even recorded radio ads, supporting her Republican opponent. The betrayal cut deep. Here was someone she'd worked with for years, someone she considered a friend, actively working against her political dreams.
Nancy lost the election badly, the defeat stung, but she didn't regret running. She'd spoken up for what she believed in, even when it was difficult, even when former friends turned against her. That was Nancy, principled to the end. After the failed campaign, Nancy stepped away from Hollywood mostly for good. She found peace teaching theater and drama at Juniata College in Pennsylvania. Her students loved her honesty, her knowledge, and her willingness to share real industry experience. Nancy wasn't bitter about her faded fame, she was happy to pass on what she'd learned to the next generation. Nancy eventually moved to a quiet farm in Connecticut, then later to Palm Springs, California. In Palm Springs she found her true calling. She worked with the Humane Society, rescuing and caring for abandoned animals. She volunteered with United Cerebral Palsy, advocating for people with disabilities. She mentored young actors through the Desert Theater League, helping them navigate the same industry that had both blessed and cursed her own life. Nancy wasn't wealthy anymore, but she was finally, genuinely happy. She was living according to her own values, helping others, making a real difference. This was the life she'd always wanted, meaningful, purposeful, authentic. But Nancy carried one burden from her Hollywood years that would eventually catch up with her. Like many people of her generation, she'd started smoking when cigarettes were considered glamorous and sophisticated. By the 1980s, the health consequences were becoming clear, but the addiction was too strong to break. In 1990, Nancy was diagnosed with cancer. She fought it with the same determination she'd brought to everything else in her life. Chemotherapy, radiation, experimental treatments. Nancy tried everything. But the disease had spread too far. On February 3, 1991, Nancy Culp died in Palm Desert, California. She was just 69. There were no big television specials remembering Nancy. No award show tributes, no Hollywood memorial services. Just a quiet funeral back in Pennsylvania, in the small town of Mifflintown, where her journey had begun decades earlier. Nancy was buried there, far from the bright lights and big dreams of Hollywood. But Nancy's quiet death doesn't diminish the extraordinary life she lived. Think about everything she accomplished. She served her country in World War II when women weren't expected to be soldiers. She built a successful acting career, playing characters that made millions of people laugh. She had the courage to pursue a secret interracial romance in an era when such relationships could destroy careers and lives. She ran for political office when most celebrities avoided controversy. She dedicated her later years to helping animals, disabled people, and young actors. Nancy Culp was a trailblazer in every sense of the word. She broke barriers quietly, without fanfare or self-promotion. She lived according to her own principles, even when it cost her personally and professionally. She chose substance over celebrity, service over fame, authenticity over image. In today's world of social media oversharing and celebrity culture, Nancy's discretion feels almost revolutionary. She kept her secrets because she had to, but also because she believed some things were private. She didn't need public validation for her choices. She didn't need the world's approval to live her truth. Nancy's secret romance with Redd Foxx represents something beautiful about human connection. Two people from completely different worlds found each other despite all the barriers society put between them. Race, background, public image, none of that mattered when they were alone together, talking about books and ideas and dreams. Their relationship couldn't survive the pressures of 1960s America, but it existed, it was real, it mattered. That's Nancy Culp's real legacy, not just the laughs she gave us as Miss Jane Hathaway, though those were precious. Her legacy is showing us how to live with dignity, courage, and authenticity, in a world that often rewards none of those things. She showed us that it's possible to be famous without losing yourself, to face setbacks without becoming bitter, to age gracefully while still fighting for what matters. Nancy never got to see a world where interracial relationships were fully accepted, where women could serve in combat roles, where LGBT people could live openly, but she helped create that world through her quiet example of courage and authenticity. Some celebrities burn bright and flame out young. Others, like Nancy glow steadily throughout their lives, providing light and warmth to everyone around them. Nancy's light never went out, it just moved from stage to classroom to animal shelter to charity organization. Wherever Nancy went, she made things better. Her story reminds us that real heroism isn't always loud or obvious. Sometimes it's the quiet courage to be yourself, when the world wants you to be someone else. Sometimes it's the strength to love who you love, even in secret. Sometimes it's the wisdom to know when to fight and when to walk away. Nancy Culp walked away from Hollywood at the height of her fame to run for Congress. She walked away from easy celebrity to teach college students. She walked away from bitterness after electoral defeat to help rescue animals and disabled people. Every time she walked away from what was expected, she walked toward what mattered. That's a lesson worth remembering. Nancy Culp may be gone, but her example lives on. In everyone who chooses service over fame, authenticity over image, love over fear. In everyone who fights quietly for what's right, who helps others without seeking credit, who lives according to their own values instead of other people's expectations. Nancy Culp was more than Miss Jane Hathaway. She was a war veteran, a political candidate, a teacher, a volunteer, a secret lover, and a quiet revolutionary. She was a woman who refused to be contained by anyone else's definition of who she should be. Her story deserves to be remembered, not just the comedy, but the courage, not just the fame, but the fights she fought and the battles she won, not just the character she played but the extraordinary woman she was. Nancy Culp lived her truth, even when it was difficult, even when it was dangerous, even when it was secret. That's something worth celebrating. That's something worth learning from. That's something that still matters. Hit subscribe to uncover more hidden Hollywood stories that changed everything.